You're listening to Glove Up or Shut Up on the Angry Marks Podcast Network.
And welcome everybody to another episode of Glove Up or Shut Up right here at AngryMarks.com. My name is Peter H. I'm joined once again by my co-host from Omaha, Nebraska, Stevie J.
Well, Peter, we had a memorable edition of Bellator 179 on Friday, and now things are going to heat up with UFC this weekend. We're going to a special event with Alexander Gustafsson and John Teixeira free on TV. You can hardly beat that.
Well, Stanley Cup playoffs are pretty much at the tail end of it now. By the time most of you listen to this, we'll have our Stanley Cup finalists determined, and Nashville has already punched their tickets, so hopefully game one of the Stanley Cup Finals isn't on Saturday, Steve, because it's going to be a really hard choice for me there.
Well, that's what they make DVRs for, or as you like to call them, PVRs.
Yes, or I can do what I did last night and do some split screen action, so.
That's true. Whatever works, brother. Do what you got to do to keep up with sports.
Absolutely. We do have a lot of news to get to, including the UFC's athlete retreat this year, and.
Oh, yes.
There were some fireworks. Yeah.
Sparks flew, yes.
But let's start with some news this week, and the headline fight for UFC Fight Night 114 in Mexico City was announced. It's Brandon Moreno against Sergio Pettis. Sergio Pettis main eventing a fight night. Big step for his career. Mm-hmm. Do you think a major win here will help him get out of his brother's shadow?
Honestly, you might already say he is, because I don't think Anthony Pettis is the fighter he used to be. He certainly hasn't looked it for a while.
No, that's definitely true, but with the Pettis name, you expect a quality fight here. And a headline fight, the pressure will be on, but Moreno, that's no joke. He will catch you if you leave yourself open.
Right. This is not a gimme fight for him.
No.
So, yeah, you're right that it could increase his profile if he gets the big win, but that's not guaranteed. I think there was a better guarantee in last Friday's fight than there would be in that fight.
You know what? Let's just go with the athlete story because that's just it's so newsworthy, I guess we could say here. For those who don't know, there was a big athlete retreat in Vegas this past weekend, and Cyborg Justino punched Angela Magana allegedly, and I'm really saying allegedly loosely because there's video of it now. So, I mean, she's been cited for misdemeanor battery. She could face 6 months in jail, and Magana wants to fight her in the cage?
Yeah, how's that going to fix the problem here? I think once you have an arrest and civil proceedings that are going to fall out of that, there could be a civil lawsuit even if it doesn't get adjudicated in court. I don't think you fix that by getting in the octagon.
No, if they did that, how many court cases would be settled in the octagon?
You just proposed a reality show that I don't actually want.
It would probably be hosted by Mayhem Miller.
Oh, geez, no. Yeah. That would be except for adults instead of bullies and beatdowns. That would be, no thanks.
See, I like the concept of the fighters retreat. I like the idea of getting the fighters and having them kick back and, fraternize and, just, I guess there's some stuff there that they could learn and, kind of take a weekend off from the constant grind of training camps, but it's just so much, I don't know. In theory, it's a good idea. In concept, not so much. I don't know. I'm curious to see what's going to happen here, but, I don't know. I'm just going to move on because there's so many different ways we can go about this. And I mean, there's some cool pictures that came out of it and some, like the Cyborg video that was released. I'm just going to move on.
I think so.
Jessica Evil Eye wants to fight at 125.
Well,
I think that's a great idea.
If that division comes to fruition and gets stacked with quality opponents for her, then sure, why not?
Now, the 125 division was recently announced, and they're going to have a tough season, and, we've already been down that path before. And I'm kind of sad because, Viola Turno
left right before they made the division. That's what I'm saying. It's like they're trying to do this with a season of tough, but they've got tough competition, no pun intended, because Bellator kind of beat them to the punch on this. They already started stocking a division full of the best 125s out there. So, I mean, sure, they can do a season, they can make a division, but are there I mean, you and I have had this argument before about the 145 division. Are there enough women to go around for everybody to have a 145? And right now, Bellator's got the better 145 division and the better champion at 145 because UFC can't even come up with 15 women for theirs.
Yeah. I didn't say it was perfect. I just said they announced it.
Yeah, I get you.
Another fight was announced, UFC Fox 25 in Long Island, New York. Dennis Bermudez against Darren Elkins.
Oh, that's a very intriguing fight.
That could be a shaker in that division for sure in the rankings.
I think so. I think that's a fight that'll definitely have implications.
Now, just going over some other fights here. Steve Garcia fights Joe Warren at Bellator 181 in July.
Okay.
How is Joe Warren in the interviews?
Always good. Always charismatic. Always fun to talk to.
Let's see, what else is here? We're going to talk about Bellator Bellator NYC coming up, in a few weeks here. And, that's a card that's, even the casual fans, more and more interest in that show, but I'm not sure if it's for the right reasons or the wrong reasons. You know what I mean?
I understand.
It's, when you get a casual fan of mixed martial arts ask you about certain fights on a card, and it's not who's going to win, it's are they going to pass the drug test, or are they going to be injured, or this or that. It's like, no, I'm going to watch the fight. I don't know. I'm curious about it, but I'm also at the same time trying to ignore the negativity that could come from this fights between Fedor Mitrione and Wanderlei and Sonnen. You know, if you could take those two fights off of the card just for a second and focus on the other fights on the card, you still got a bang up card.
Oh yeah, it's a quality card top to bottom. There's a lot of divisions that are getting major action there. The lightweight division, the light heavyweight division, the welterweight division. There's good shit up and down that card.
Well, speaking of divisions, Stevie, it was just announced today as well. We're going to switch over to UFC here. The champion at 135 had to pull out of his fight against TJ Dillashaw, Cody Garbrandt. That back injury is not progressing at the rate that the doctors would like him to, and he needs more time to recover, so the fight has been scrapped. And Romero Whittaker, as rumored last week on this show, is going to be an interim title fight. The dreaded interim title fight.
Yay.
Another one. How many interims now? Like, we talked about this last week. I don't want to go too much on a rant because I did that last week, but another effing interim title fight was made official. I mean,
well, okay, I got some good news for you though. In a couple of weeks here, we're going to settle this interim featherweight division because Max Holloway and Jose Aldo are going to meet. So that'll be one off the table.
It just got replaced.
Yeah, I guess so.
And because the interim fight will be at 213, it'll be the co-main event with Amanda Nunes and Shevchenko as the main event.
Ah, well, that's a nice 1-2 punch, so to speak.
Now, do you put the women's fight on last? Is that the true main event here, or is the interim title fight the main event?
I think you gotta go with the actual title over the interim title. I kind of find it hard to justify putting a title that's a placeholder title above somebody that actually won and is defending her belt.
Now, do you think this will affect the buy rate for the UFC 213 show in general?
I think it'll do just about the same as it would either way. I really don't think it hurts it terribly.
So you think the absence of Garbrandt and Dillashaw doesn't really affect the buy rate too much?
I'm not saying that isn't a quality fight that people aren't interested in. I don't want you to misread my comments on that, but we've got different stratospheres of star power when it comes to UFC. You've got your Conor McGregor level. You've got your John Jones level. And then you've got, you know, the middle of the road where your guys like Daniel Cormier and Stipe Miocic and, you know, that caliber of draw. And then somewhere further down the line, I mean, again, not taking anything away from Cody Garbrandt, but is he really at either of those calibers at this point, so young in his championship reign? I don't think you can argue that he was or is.
Do you think Garbrandt is as much of a draw as someone like Demetrius Johnson?
I mean, that's a tough one because you know me, I'm personally invested in DJ because I think he's such a fantastic fighter, but the metrics aren't there when you look at his buy rates, when you look at viewers on Fox. He doesn't have that star appeal for whatever reason, even though he's a phenomenal fighter and arguably the most dominant in any weight division of any promotion. It just doesn't come through in the actual terms of audience interest. So I might actually put Garbrandt ahead of him, but not by too much, because again, Garbrandt is so new to being in this position that I don't know if the metrics are really there to say if he's a draw or not, but he's probably more of a draw than DJ just because unfortunately DJ is at the bottom end.
Which is sad because when you look at champions who you expect to be at buy rate levels like at top of the tier, someone who's dominant, who oozes charisma, that's DJ.
Yeah, but fans just have never bought into him for whatever reason. It's not his fault. He's certainly doing everything that somebody in his position should do. Absolutely.
All right. Well, speaking of someone who's in a good position and doing what they should do, let's talk about Bellator 179, Paul Daly and Rory McDonald.
I was gonna say,
I lost my voice there for a second. I had to censor myself.
All right, because I was seriously going to question if the Canadian of the podcast could forget that Rory McDonald was in the main fucking event. I was like, that's one for the history books right there. If you can't remember that Rory McDonald is fighting, that's something.
No, next time I'll be like, Rory McDonald. Like, I just lost my voice there all of a sudden.
Okay, well, you've covered your tracks. You've covered your tracks, especially with the cough there. I think you've covered yourself nicely. So what did you think? You know I have to cover the fight because it's my job to for MMA Mania, so I want your opinion first.
You know, from an outside perspective, if you take all the national pride out of it, it's striker versus grappler. He took him down, and he choked him out. I mean, once Daly was on the ground, I was like, oh, he's in Rory's wheelhouse now. This is not good. And Daly's got to do something or else let's fight over. Oh, he tapped. Like, that was it. I mean, I was happy for Rory, absolutely. But Daly, I'm not sure how his plan to shock the world came to fruition here.
It's fair to say that it didn't come close unless by shocking, it was shocking how popular he was and shocking how easily he was finished. And I don't mean any disrespect to him because I personally like him because I've had great conversations with him in the interviews and I respect what he can do as a fighter because I've seen the kind of devastating knockouts he can bring to a fight. He is a guy that's always capable of putting anybody's lights out in any fight at any time. But Rory is, in terms of talent and ability, and especially when it comes to his technique on the ground, he's on another planet. And unfortunately, unless Rory McDonald was just going to stand in front of him and trade shots, Daly wasn't going to have the opportunity he wanted to land that one punch. And McDonald wisely did not give it to him.
No, he protected himself and stayed out of Daly's range to the point where Daly, you could almost see the wheels in his head turning, crap, what do I do now? And I don't know what the coaches were telling him after the first round, but it was like, no, you're telling him wrong. Like, I mean, obviously we know like it's easy to play Monday morning quarterback in a fight, but whatever the plan was, it didn't work. And if you're, okay, it was a one-off fight, Daly's next fight, his opponent's going to be like, if I can take him down, I have a chance. And if my ground game is sufficient, I'm going to beat him. Daly's got to work on his takedown defense, and he's got to figure out a way for certain elite fighters like a McDonald to, shorten up that range you need for that knockout shot. You need to close the range. And I know it's easy to say that, but you watch the footwork, you watch I mean, there was definitely an advantage here for McDonald to stay out of Daly's reach. It's not like, it was a walk in the park for Rory, but this is a fight that, he thought that he could win, and his game plan at, TriStar Gym, worked perfectly here.
Well, not just TriStar, because remember we had that discussion on our last show about how he was actually bouncing back and forth between his old training camp before UFC and TriStar. He was splitting his time.
Which is smart. You get two sides of the coin there.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's what we saw, because that is essentially what Rory promised us on the pre-fight press conference. He said, I'm splitting my time because I want to get back to the old Rory, the Rory that's hungry, the Rory that's animalistic, and I'm going to go out there and show you guys that I've returned to my old ways and that that's the fighter that I'm capable of being in Bellator. And for an opening statement for his Bellator debut, I think he proved it.
Okay, so you got my opinion on this fight. What was yours?
I really got everything that I expected to see out of Rory, using exchanges on the feet to set up takedowns, and then once he got the takedowns, he was looking for the submissions, and as you noted, if there's a weakness in Daly's game, it's his ground game, and he always says in every interview and every podcast that, you know, I'm underrated on the ground, I'm actually pretty good on the ground, and people don't know it. Well, I believe him. Because if I was in there with him, he'd submit me. Let's not make any bones about that. I'm sure there is a lot of people in there that he could fuck up on the ground. But Rory McDonald is not one of those people. And once Rory got him in the right position, you knew he was going to get in there or get behind him or whatever it took. You know, he was not waiting around. He just needed to get Daly on the ground and get that opening. And then just swoop in and finish the deal. And it was coming. When I saw him go for the rear naked, I was like, that's done. Even before he had the arm around Daly's neck, I was like, there is no way McDonald is not finishing this, because as much as Daly talks about his ground game, it's not that good. It's not elite like McDonald is elite.
Mm-hmm. And did you notice that McDonald looked a little bit more jacked as well?
I think that 11 months off has not just been good for his nose, it's been good for his physique as well. I think he was so young when he was in UFC that he hadn't really filled out yet. I think we're actually seeing a more physically mature and perhaps fight intellectually mature Rory McDonald than we did. Now, I've heard the flip side of this coin. I've heard people saying, well, that's easy for Rory McDonald to be a big shark in a very small pond because Bellator is not the deep waters that UFC is. I don't know if I agree with that. I think Bellator is solidly the number 2 promotion at this point. I think they've got a lot of killers at welterweight, and I think guys like Douglas Lima and Andrei Koreshkov are worthy opponents for him, and I would not be taking those guys lightly.
I think that argument applies to certain divisions of Bellator. Not Bellator as a whole, but certain divisions, absolutely. Big fish, small pond. But this division, no.
No.
Definitely cannot say that. Bellator matches up pretty nicely with the UFC fighters who are in the top tier as well. Like, if you had like a super card, you can make a pay-per-view of 1 through 5 in each promotion, and there'd be 5 quality fights.
Well, just to re-emphasize this point, look at everybody who thought Benson Henderson was just going to come over to Bellator and cakewalk his way through the welterweight division. That didn't happen.
Look at Phil Davis, though.
Yeah, well, Phil Davis was the right guy at the right time. And as we learned from another fight on this card, there's another guy that has a big hole in his ground game.
Linton Vassell against Liam McGarry. 3rd round, 228 submission win for Vassell.
Now, earlier I was talking about how Rory was looking for all the different options on the ground. For Linton Vassell, there was only one ever option. It was like, I can take this guy down. I'm so capable of putting this arm triangle on him. I just need to keep taking him down, and eventually it's going to be there. And after 3 rounds of that, you could tell McGarry was just completely gassed and couldn't stop the takedown, and Vassell just locked it on so easy. It was like, wow. And I kind of predicted this without really intending to, because one of the questions I asked Liam McGarry before the fight was, do you think that Linton Vassell learned anything from your fight with Phil Davis? Deja fucking vu as I'm watching this fight. I'm like, oh my God, he did. He figured out the chink in Liam's armor and he exploited it, and Phil gave him the blueprint.
It's not a minor deficiency now. It's a full-blown, we need to fix this error in your game right now.
And it's not like Liam is working with bad guys at the Hens of
No.
Gracie Academy. He should be able to fix this problem, and why it hasn't been fixed, I don't know.
Let me ask you about this next fight, because I have a curiosity here as to what you thought about it.
Oh, I'm laughing because you're gonna find out.
Chick Congo against Augusto Sakai, and Sakai lost via split decision. Did the right guy win here?
Yes, sadly, yes.
How?
Okay, you know how, but
I can't.
if you're gonna make,
I know why, but tell the fans why not.
you want me to explain this to the listeners? Okay.
Absolutely.
The first round was Czech Congo doing a whole lot of jack shit and saving all his gas and giving Sakai the round. He basically threw away that round, but Sakai was very cautious, very wary, didn't want to walk into a punch, figured that Congo was playing some sort of game with him, so he only threw a few kicks, and it was just a really boring round, save for maybe the last minute. But then the second and the third round happened, and the darkness does what the darkness does to everybody. He takes them down, and he holds them down. Does he do much with it once he gets them down? Not really.
No.
But because
No,
riding on top does score points, and the longer you're on top, the more it scores. So it's not hard for a judge to see that Czech Congo is in the dominant position, even if he isn't doing anything with it. And unless Sakai could get up or respond with some sort of submission attempt, there was no way for him to win off his back in this case, and it didn't happen.
You know the comparison that I've put on Congo the last couple of fights, and it's proved again in this show. He reminds me of Ben Askren. Tell me I'm wrong.
No, thank you. You just gave me the transition that I've been waiting for. Guess what? Guess who's fighting on Friday?
No.
And guess who's covering his fight?
No.
You got it. Funky Ben Askren is fighting at One Dynasty of Heroes. It's going to be 7 a.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Singapore time, and I'm covering the Ben Askren versus Agalantani fight. I am looking forward to it, brother.
Do you have Tassimo or Keurig on standby?
I'm not going to need it because I actually like Ben Askren. See,
and for those who don't know, that's coffee, by the way, folks, not some wacky drink.
No. He's talking about coffee makers with the little cups that you put in, you pull down the lever, and it makes you a full cup. But I'm telling you, the difference here is that Czech Congo, there's nothing to watch because he does a very methodical, plodding, big man, heavyweight takedown. He just pushes you into the fence until you get tired, and then he double legs you. Whereas Ben Askren, for all you complain about him, Ben Askren has Olympic level wrestling, which means he's creative and diverse in the ways that he can take you down. He can pick your ankle. He can leg trip you. He can sweep you from behind. He can judo throw you. He can come up with a million different ways to get somebody on their back. So for me, the fun of a Ben Askren fight is not the fact that he's going to hold you down once he gets you down, because you can make that argument if you want to. But Ben Askren has a greater diversity of how he gets you there. And I like seeing Ben Askren's technique. He has great technique.
So 7 a.m., but that's just the first fight. The main event fight won't be until what, 9 or 10 in the morning?
Yeah, it'll probably be about 10:30 my time.
Okay. So at 7 Central, that's 8 Eastern, so you're looking about 11. Okay, that's not too bad. 11 in the morning, or 10 or 11. You're not going to need like the massive stein of coffee to wake up for that fight. It's not like it was the Macau card where it was like 4:30 in the morning Eastern with the prelims.
No, honestly, I don't mind covering these Singapore cards because, one, I get paid, money, bling, bling, ching, ching. Two, at 8 a.m., it's not really unreasonable Eastern time or 7 my time. It's not like that much different from when I get up for work every day anyway. So It's in my wheelhouse. And ONE FC is just a fun promotion in general. They always put on a good show. They have English commentary. The fights are real easy to watch. I love it.
There you go. As far as the other main cards here, main fights on the card, sorry, Alex Lahore beat Dan Edwards TKO in the second round at 56 seconds.
I think I told you this was inevitable, but if you don't remember or the listeners don't remember, it's because Alex Lahore, French phenom, 11-1, fighting a guy whose career record was 14-14. This was going to happen.
Absolutely. And Baby Slice Kevin Ferguson Jr. beating DJ Griffin in the first round at 340.
It wasn't a gimme per se because DJ Griffin had some amateur experience that was greater comparable to Kevin Ferguson, but honestly they were looking for a guy for him to beat up to make his name, and the last time they tried that in San Jose it didn't work out. This time they found a guy who seemed woefully unprepared. Even for having a 4-3 amateur record, that probably should have been scrutinized a little more closely because that means he only won 4 out of his 7 amateur fights. He could have been 3-4 instead of 4-3. You know, it's like, okay, you're mediocre as an amateur. Are you really going to be that good as a pro? And he wasn't.
I think Baby Slice still has some ways to go, though.
Oh, yeah. I'm not saying that Baby Slice isn't in the baby part of his career. Now, he's 1-1. He's gotten back to 500, so that's a good start for him. But he needs to keep working with the body shop with AJ Mercenary McKee and his father Antonio McKee and picking up all the techniques that they can give him for striking, takedowns, grappling, everything they can give him. He needs to work on all of it because he's going to get much tougher competition. Although, if you heard my interview with him, cheap plug, he says in 2 years' time he'll be untouchable. So let's see if he keeps that promise, because 2 years is a long time, and there's a lot of guys in the lightweight division that he wants to fight between now and then. So if he's going to be untouchable, it's a long road ahead.
But there's only so much that you can teach and so much you learn through experience.
Yeah, and that's the important part for him right now is he's had 2 fights, so he's had that experience. He's seen the holes in his game with Aaron Hamilton, taught him what not to do, and then he had a second chance where he got an opponent who was not as capable as Aaron Hamilton, arguably, but still he needed to go out there and execute a better game plan than he did in his first fight, and I'd say he did that.
Now, is there anything on the prelims you want to mention before we move on to this weekend's UFC show?
Well, since they bonused it on the television, we should talk about Fabian Edwards versus Rafael Szyrzowski. You remember that fight, Peter?
I have written down flying knee.
Yeah. Okay, what was the last flying knee you saw that was this vicious? I think you know.
Oh. I want to say Ultimate Fighter, but I think I'm wrong.
No, I'm thinking Michael Venom Page against Cyborg Santos. Remember the fractured skull?
I was thinking UFC for some reason. I totally just overlooked the MVP's skull-crushing finale, so to speak.
Yeah, that was this fight. When you saw Edwards jump up in the air and his right knee struck, that was a wrap. It was no way the fight was continuing after that.
Now, tell me Fabian didn't roll out the Pokeball and said, game over. Okay.
He didn't do anything like that. There was no stunting after this fight. In fact, the only stunting was actually Paul Daly getting into a little bit of a toss-up with MVP outside the cage.
That could be our next fight, but I don't know. Maybe I'm getting older, but the post-fight antics like this, I think I grew out of that after the whole Diaz-Miller fiasco. And guys, we're on CBS. Guys, we're on CBS. We're on national TV right now.
Well, you know what? This was on tape delay, so Bellator had the choice whether or not to show this, and they made a focus out of it. So you can say that you're tired of the antics, but clearly they are not, because they didn't cut any of this. I mean, okay, let me set the table for people who don't know what we're talking about, who didn't see the show. Mm-hmm. After the fight, they interview both fighters, because obviously main event, big deal, it's in London, everybody's excited. And McDonald is like, you know what, I'm here, I'm gonna dominate, I'm coming for the winner of that title fight at Bellator in New York City, I'm gonna be there, I'm gonna be ready, I'm gonna challenge the winner, and I'm gonna take that title. And then, of course, they go to Paul Daly, and they're like, well, you know what, you're in London, you're really popular here, it didn't go your way, what's next for you? And he's like, well, I want that pussy Michael Page. And I'm like, oh dear God, where is this going? And then for like the next minute straight, he keeps saying, I know things about him. I've seen things, I've read things, and I know insider things that I can't say, but he's a pussy. He didn't take the fight, he's a pussy. Pussy, 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 pussy. Like for a minute straight is Paul Daly talking trash on Michael Venom Page. And then they're like, thank you very much, and that's the end of it, and we go to commercial. And when we come back from commercial, they go out of their way to point out the fact that MVP was at cage side, took exception to this, and got into a physical altercation with Daly as he was exiting the cage.
So, a few things. If people ask why this episode is explicit, blame Stevie J.
No, blame Paul Daly for repeated use of the word pussy.
Second, the censor was out taking a whiz during this segment because he comes back and is like, what did I miss? Oh, you're fired.
Well, no, I don't think they really had to because A, it's Spike TV and they kind of do what they want anyway. They've got a history of that. And B, this fight didn't happen until 10:30 my time, which was 11:30 Eastern. So I think by that time they're pretty much in the safe harbor for saying explicit things.
I forget who said it, but someone said to me afterwards, I think this fighter is sponsored by some gynecologist somewhere. I'm like, what? What do you mean? Oh, right. Okay, I gotcha.
I'm not saying I endorse this. I'm just saying Bellator chose to make a focal point of it. They did it with a reason.
They did. They're pumping up their next fight. I understand that.
Mm-hmm.
But we should move on to UFC Fight Night 109 in another foreign land, the land of Sweden.
Yes, indeed. Alexander the Mauler Gustafsson and Glover Teixeira in a fight that has very major ranking implications.
And this is a fight where I hate saying fighter A has to beat fighter B, he has to win. No, Gustafsson really has to win this fight because if he loses, what do you do with him? He's 17-5 at that point, and his toughest fight was a loss.
Mm-hmm.
And he's in you talked about a stacked division. Even with Rumble leaving, it's still a stacked division.
He's in a vulnerable spot because he's only won 2 out of his last 5 fights, so...
Yeah. I don't want to say his fight might be his last fight, but...
I wouldn't cut Gustafsson because you know that Bellator would snap him up in a heartbeat. I'd keep him just for that reason, but at 3-3 in his last 6, that's problematic if you want to go anywhere in a very, very crowded light heavyweight division with a whole lot of killers.
You know, if he gets rocked, and we're talking where serious rocking here, and he has to retire, he would make one hell of a coach.
Oh yeah. He would be an expert for any team, anywhere, anytime.
He'd get top dollar, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Now, his opponent, Glover, prototypical, I've said this before, I'll say it again, he is a prototypical Jekyll and Hyde fighter. You don't know which one is going to show up.
Actually, I would say he's a prototypical John Hackleman pit fighter in that he's...
Pit fighter!
Well,
haven't heard that term in a long time.
But that's what they call their team, the pit. And that's where they train. That they train like that. They believe in that style. And that's what Glover Teixeira brings. If you fight that kind of style fight with him, he's gonna leave you looking for your teeth. And if you don't, like you said, then he's a Jekyll and Hyde fighter. You never know what you're gonna get.
But, I think pit fighter, and it's a hardcore fan of me that marked out for that because I hear pit fighter, I think of Tank Abbott.
No, well, I'm just talking about the team. I'm not specifically saying this X, Y, or Z is equal to that. I'm just saying...
No, I know. I've been watching some old school UFC tapes and the art of pit fighting. I'm like, that's not a thing. That's not a thing. You know that, right? That's not a thing.
Well, speaking of that's not a thing, I have to say this entire division is not going to be a thing if it doesn't go down with all these fights, because 2 light heavyweight bouts on top and all of these rankings are going to be severely affected. So either of these fights falls apart and the light heavyweight division would be left adrift. So nobody get a sprained toe or a cut or anything for the next 4 days, please.
So I got Mahler winning this one. What about you?
Well, according to the Las Vegas odds, Mahler is the minus 320 favorite. Teixeira is plus 260. Now, you know me. I don't place bets. I'm not telling you these odds because I'm putting any money on it. That's never been the case. However, were I a betting man, I would be looking at Glover's record over the last 5 fights, 4-1, and I'd be looking at Gustafsson 2-3. I'd be thinking plus 260. That's kind of tempting.
No, I'm still sticking with the Mahler.
In the only fight that's really gone bad in a major way for Glover is he got knocked out by Rumble Johnson in 13 seconds. And speaking of those guys that have one punch that could put you on your ass, Paul Daly's one of those guys, and so's Rumble Johnson. So ain't no shame in getting knocked out in 13 seconds by Rumble Johnson.
That's a fight he'd like to forget, and probably does.
I don't think he could remember it if he wanted to. I'm sure his entire recording tape is just erased for that day.
Mm-hmm. What about Misha Kirkinov against Volkan Ozdemir?
Yep, Ozdemir and Shirkinov is another very important fight in this division, because in the main event, we got number 1 and number 2, and in the co-main event, we got number 5 and number 7. So you're looking at future contenders here between these 2 fights. You know, whoever wins between Jones and Cormier, one of these guys is coming up next. Now, Ozdemir is in a very unique position because he came in and legitimately shocked the world. Mm-hmm. You talked about what Paul Daly said, and Paul Daly is capable of it, but it didn't emerge. Whereas Ozdemir, we kind of thought he was capable of it, and then he really did shock the world by getting a split decision over OSP and rocketing his way up the UFC rankings overnight. Whereas Shirkinov is a guy who has been slowly and steadily working his way up in recognition and prominence. And he's done so with getting 7 straight wins and increasingly quality wins in his UFC career since he came over in 2015. He got a knockout, a neck crank, an arm triangle, and a guillotine, and pretty much established himself as among not only elites at light heavyweight, but elite submission artists. And this is where I want to throw it to you, Peter, because you were there when he fought Kudaleba. So what did you think when you saw him fight in Ottawa?
You know, it was one of those fights where it was impressive, especially, you know, on that stage of a fight night where a good fight there will put you onto a pay-per-view. A bad fight, you're doomed to fight in prelims for a while. And he really stepped up to the challenge. Now, that being said, you know, it's another fight, but this is a much bigger stage. I mean, yes, fight night's a big deal, but pay-per-view is the next tier.
Well, I think Serkinov has proved himself capable of that tier with his performance against Krylov at UFC 206.
Yes. And, you know, he does train in Toronto. He lives in Toronto, actually, as well. If you don't know that.
In fact, he was just on Live Audio Wrestling because he dropped by their studios in Toronto and did a chat with John Pollock.
Yeah. And, he met with some other media personalities there at the TSN building as well. And, from the interviews that I saw, you know, great guy, very, personable fighter, and he's really a good ambassador for the sport. That being said, you know, this fight will definitely be a proving fight for him as far as this is the co-main event of a pay-per-view. He could be a win here, a dominant win here. He could put himself in a very, very advantageous position here with a dominant win where he goes up 2 spots maybe, and 2 spots up from where he is now. That's pretty damn elite.
Yeah, and this keeps him in the stratosphere that he wants to be, because this isn't a pay-per-view coming up this weekend, but being in the co-main event of a card headlined by Gustafsson and Teixeira, that's still a big deal. Even though this is free fights, you're not paying for them, but that, again, this is where you don't want to shit the bed. I think that's pretty much what you're trying to say.
Sorry, I meant to say fight night, but he's on a higher tier of the card.
No, I get your point. And to emphasize your point, Shirkinov is the minus 420 favorite right now.
Yeah.
That seems a little long to me. Not that I don't respect Shirkinov's skills, but again, if I was the kind of guy who was placing bets, you'd think about a parlay and you'd put Teixeira at plus 260 and Ozdemir at plus 335, and you'd start thinking about getting a big payday from those two upsets.
I think the telltale sign will be if this fight ends in the first round or if it goes the distance.
Right, because that's one thing we do know about Shirkinov so far is that he's good in the early rounds, and not that he didn't get a finish against Gudalaba late, he did it in the third round, but he's at his strongest early in the fight.
I think if it goes to the judges, I'll be very surprised, and I think a first round finish is what he's looking for.
Yeah, I'm sure that's what he's hoping for, but Ozdemir, for coming out of nowhere and rocketing to the spot that he's got now, he's not just gonna roll over and let somebody take it. He's not about to say, yeah, that was a fluke against OSB. Here, you can have my pass back. I don't need to be in this spot. He's not giving it up without a fight, literally.
Now, what about Ben Saunders and Peter Sabata?
Well, let's look at the Vegas odds first, which are a coin flip. Sabata is minus 105. Saunders is minus 115. So they have it going either way. I'll give you my pick, but I want to hear yours first.
I hate picking what I'm going to say, but I actually have Saunders winning in a decision.
I don't think that's unreasonable, because the last really big, destroying him fight was Patrick Cote in the second round, and we know the quality of caliber of fighter Cote was. So other than that, Saunders has won 5 out of 6, and he's done it against tough guys like Court McGee, Kenny Robertson, Jacob Volkman. Quality opposition there. Sabata, it's not that he isn't a good fighter, and it's not that he doesn't have a great record at 16-5-1, but I almost feel like he's not fighting the same level of fighters that Saunders was, because I'm not looking at Steve Kennedy and Powell Pollock as being signature wins, and then he got TKO'd by Kyle Noak, who, as we know, is now retired. I feel like Sabata, his record is good, but I don't know if he's as good as his record. I hope that makes sense.
Oh, it does make sense, absolutely. I'm trying to determine which one could steal the show, and Kirchhoff and Saunders both are capable of stealing a show as far as the performance of the night. But if I'm looking at a fight-by-fight comparison, I'm leaning more towards Sabata and Saunders as the show, as the fight that could be, in fact, the prototypical fight of the night if both fighters come to fight. If Sabata, after the first round, is mentally checked out, it's going to be a boring fight.
I agree. That's a good way to put it.
Now, as far as the other fights on the main card, we've got Omari Akhmedov against Abdul Razak Al-Hassan.
Yes, Al-Hassan. And he's minus 260. Akhmedov is plus 220. And as for their recent fights that would give you some sort of idea, well, with Rasan, he's undefeated. So that's a good sign right there that he's a stud on the rise. Whereas Akhmedov, well, he's got some quality fights that he's won and got some quality fights that he's lost. He beat Kyle Noak, and we mentioned Noak's retired now, so there's something to be said for that. But he lost to Sergio Moraes. He lost to Gunnar Nelson. So I think you've got what you called earlier a Jekyll and Hyde fighter when it comes to Akhmedov. You just don't know which one's going to show up, and I hate to say it, but I think the prospect in Al-Hassan is probably going to eat him for lunch, and that's what they've got him here for.
I'm going to use a very seldom used wrestling reference on this show, Stevie. Akhmedov has more ring time than Hassan has shower time.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, Akhmedov, don't underestimate him. Yes, he's 16-4. He's had a few wars. But this Hassan is 5-0. And, I mean, I don't expect a cakewalk here. This fight I can see ending in the third round, but I can see it for Akhmedov.
I guess that's why they fight the fights. We'll find out.
Now, what about Nordin Talib against Oliver Enkamp?
All right. Well, the Las Vegas odds have Nordin as a huge favorite at minus 560, Enkamp plus 430. And that line is so wide that it actually made me want to look up why there's such a stark difference. So I went to one of my favorite resources, the Sherdog Fight Finder. And Enkamp, I'm guessing, got on this card because he's probably friends with Gustafsson. He's from Stockholm. He trains out of the Pancrase gym in Sweden. He's undefeated at 7-0 with 1 knockout and 4 submissions. And that's all coming against guys basically in Europe or in Sweden. So he hasn't fought anybody at the upper levels. Whereas with Nordin Talib, we know he's been in there with tough competition. And at 35 years old, he's a veteran with a lot of experience. Even though his professional record is 12-4, his overall life experience as a fighter is far greater than that, which I think is why he's a huge favorite here, because this is a guy who's been in there and won wars with the likes of Eric Silva, Chris Clements, Jingling Li. You know, he's fought real guys and real tough guys, both in UFC and Bellator. So I understand why Talib is a huge favorite here. It makes sense.
And of course, okay, let me ask you this question then. When was the last time a short replacement fighter was a favorite? It never happens. That's why Talib is the heavy favorite.
Well, I think he's also the heavy favorite because he's the more well-rounded fighter. So I think that would be the case even if Emil Weber-Meek was still in this fight with him. I think Talib would probably still be the favorite. Maybe not as wide of a favorite, considering Meek is 9-2 and his last win was a quality win over Jordan Mean, and before that, Husmar Palhares. So the line would be closer. I think Palhares might be at a point where he's no longer relevant to mixed martial arts, so I don't know how much we want to count that, a fight in Venator, whatever. But Jordan Mean was a good win, so I would put the line a lot closer if he was fighting Meek, but I think I'd still edge it for Talib.
And rounding out the main card is Jack Hermanson against Alex Nicholson.
Pretty close on this. Not quite a coin flip, but Hermanson does have a small advantage here. Minus 140, Nicholson plus 120. What do you say, Peter H.?
I'm going to go with Nicholson.
Well, looking at the Sherdog Fight Finder again, that doesn't seem like the worst idea, although I don't know if it's the best idea.
I think this is my upset special, but it's, as you said before, this is why we fight the fights.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you're going to put $2 down and this one is like a fight that, you know, if you're making a parlay, why not?
Okay, how many betting parlors are going to let you only bet $2? I can't think of one. Is that a Canadian thing? Like,
no.
Is there like some betting law that allows you to put a toonie down on a fight?
No. I'm just saying.
And if you don't know what a toonie is, people, look it up.
Jeez, yeah.
But no, I'm saying with Nicholson, he's got one quality UFC win. He knocked out Devin Clark with 3 seconds to go on the round. That's pretty good. But he also lost to Sam Alvey and the aforementioned Shirkunov. So not a lot of things going Nicholson's way per se. Whereas the Joker, other than his last fight, which was lost to Cesar Mutanch by arm triangle, he was really rolling. He had 7, 8, 9, 10 straight wins. So I feel like the upside is definitely to Hermanson here.
Now, is there one fight on the prelims that catches your eye? Because I'll tell you one that catches my eye on here.
I would say it's either going to be Nico Musoki and Bojan Milošević, or it's going to be Trevor Hot Sauce Smith and Chris Camozzi.
Yeah, Camozzi and Smith, that's the one. If you're going to pick one fight on the prelims, that's the one to watch.
Well, I don't think you should overlook Musoki because he's another guy who's friends with Gustafsson, and that probably helps him to get on this card. And I think his overall record is not too shabby at 13-4. You know, it's quality wins that he's gotten over guys like Alessio Sakara and Viscardi Andrade and Alexander Yakovlev. So just because he lost to Gastelum and Tumanov, don't look past him.
What about Damir Hazovic against Marcin Held?
That should be a really fun fight too, and a good reason to tune into Fight Pass because Held, in my opinion, is a highly underrated prospect right now. He was really good in Bellator. Right now, people are probably down on him a little because he lost to Diego, and then he lost a split decision to Joe. And I think they're forgetting just how good he was in Bellator before he came over. So it's been a steep learning curve for Held, but to me, he was so young in Bellator that he only had places to go that were up. You know, it's like this kid, and I mean this literally, I say this 25 because I'm coming up on 43 here, so to me, that's 18 years difference between him and I. I could say he's a kid compared to me, and this kid has a lot of talent, and now he's been in the deep waters in UFC, and he knows what it's like, and I think this is his time to take advantage of what he's learned and turn it around and turn in a great performance. And the odds makers seem to agree with me on that because they have him minus 335 and Hazovic is plus 275.
Now, I also mentioned this fight, if you're going to watch it, we mentioned fights like this earlier where the first fight's at 10 in the morning Eastern time. So this is a 9 a.m. start Central.
Or just because it's on Fight Pass, you can watch it whenever you want. You don't have to get up.
True, but if you're the type of fan who has to watch it live, 10 a.m. Eastern is the way to go.
Yes, if you're hardcore, make a brother act a fool, or Canadian, either way. I was going with an EPMD reference, but you can put yourself in there.
All right, so what's on tap for Thursday Night AMP this week?
Best of the Super Juniors and the fallout from Backlash.
Oh yeah, that Backlash show. It was.
That Backlash show. Oh brother.
Yeah, that's definitely a newsworthy show for Scott Steiner wrestling fans out there. We'll just say that.
Yeah, if you like veins bulging out of arms, it's a show for you.
All right, Steve, any more plugs you want to throw out there this week?
Let's go ahead and throw a shout out to 1FC, and in particular, my man Bear Frazier. Big shout out to you, brother. Thank you for that. And of course, UFC Fight Pass. If you want to see the early fights this weekend, let's throw down some money their way. $9.99 will get you those fights and all the other events they have on there. And, of course, MMAmania.com, where you can find all my coverage of all things Bellator and a few other things, too.
All right, well, for Stevie J, I'm Peter H., the Hardcore Canadian. Thanks for listening, and as I always say, never leave it to the judges. Good night, everybody.
Good night, and follow us on Twitter at HardcoreCDN and at AngryMarks.
You're listening to Glove Up or Shut Up on the Angry Marks Podcast Network.